In late 2016, at the 6th plenary session of the 18th Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, President Xi Jinping was designated the core of the CPC Central Committee and indeed of the whole party. What in the Chinese system does core mean? When President Xi received the core appellation, he was already General Secretary of the party, Chairman of the Central Military Commission, and as President of the country, Head of State, the three top leadership positions in China. So how does core augment his perceived stature or actual power? Why was Xi as core deemed necessary? How did he qualify? More pragmatically, how does a core affect party decision-making? What's the relationship between the party core and the fundamental party doctrines of democratic centralism and collective leadership? At the 19th CPC National Congress, there is much to understand about China. The significance of Xi as core is near top of the list, taking us closer to China. In October 2016, the 6th plenary session of the 18th Central Committee of the Communist Party of China called on all its members to closely unite around the CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping as the core. Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping, considered the architect of China's reform and opening up drive, had coined the term core in the late 1980s. One cannot rely on a collective leadership without a core, he said famously. Speaking at a press conference following the 6th plenum, Wang Kunming, Executive Vice Minister of the Central Committee's Publicity Department, said that the central and local departments, as well as the military, all expressed their support for Xi's position as party core, adding that this decision was based on the valuable experience of the party and we feel keenly about it.
这就是保证我们党
A core is necessary for the CPC to maintain its status as a strong and powerful Marxist ruling party and lead the great undertaking of socialism with Chinese characteristics. Identifying Xi Jinping as core of the CPC coincide with the core interest of the CPC and the Chinese people. It is essential to uphold and strengthen the leadership of the party.
To assess the meaning of President Xi as core, I speak with party thought leaders. Li Junru, former Vice President, Central Party School; Zhongxin Li, former Deputy Director, Policy Research Office of the CPC Central Committee and Executive President, China Association of Policy Science; and Hu Anggang, Dean of the Institute for Contemporary China Studies, Tsinghua University.
If we look back to the CPC's history, the concept of core is quite interesting. Being the core has nothing to do with one's position within the party. Leading officials in the party are not necessarily the core, and vice versa. For instance, the Sun Yi Conference has confirmed the collective leadership of the CPC Central Committee, with Mao Zedong as a core, which we today refer to as the first generation of Chinese central leaders. But as a matter of fact, Mao Zedong was not the party general secretary when he received the designation. Among the second generation of central leaders, Deng Xiaoping was the core, but he was not the party general secretary either. So the core is not necessarily the party leader. Regarding the third generation of central leaders, Jiang Zemin was both the core and the general secretary. For the first time, the core and the general secretary became integrated. As for Xi Jinping, he was first designated as the general secretary and afterwards designated as the core. The core is not a position within the party. Xi became the general secretary as a result of the election at the 18th Party Congress, while he earned his position as the core through the approval he's earned over the past years. Well, first he made great contributions to the fight against evil. He earned himself prestige and respect from the people through his work. Second, he came up with ideas and solutions on major issues at critical times. Third, under the system of democratic centralism of the party, Xi made decisions that proved to be right. Therefore, Xi was designated as the core at the 6th plenum of the 18th CPC Central Committee, because ever since the 18th Party Congress, he has led the party in the nation and made a great deal of achievements on many major issues. Thus, he's widely approved and naturally recognized as the core of the party.
How has President Xi been designated core affected his capacity to deal with economic transformation in China, from implementing his various policies, including the resistance of various interest groups?
Since the 18th Party Congress, we have issued many reform plans and economic strategies. Looking back, the general effect is not bad. But as we push for reform, we meet a lot of obstacles and resistance. In some areas, reform has been very slow. For example, reforms of the rural areas was carried out for more than 3 years, and it is still at the trial stage. We've only set the pilot program in 15 out of the total 2,000 plus counties in China. Now 3 years have gone by since the implementation of the 13th five-year plan. Our achievements are very limited. I think we are a bit slow in our progress. It is also the case with SOE reforms. The decision for SOE reform was announced at the 3rd plenum of the 18th CPC Central Committee. But so far, only China Unicom came up with a plan of mixed ownership not long ago, and the next step is not yet in place. So on the whole, the progress is not really satisfactory. After confirming the central leadership with President Xi Jinping as core, we will further strengthen the authority of the Central Committee. The cadres, party members, and the general public should align themselves with the party's Central Committee and all the reform plans set forth by President Xi Jinping as core.
So there were two cores who were not general secretary of the party. You had mentioned, of course, Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping. We have two cores who are or were general secretaries of the party, President Xi Jinping right now and Jiang Zemin. And then there were, shall we say, several general secretaries who were not core. So my question is, what's the difference for a general secretary to be core versus not to be core?
The position of General Secretary goes hand in hand with the Commissar system. In Mao's era, China practiced the Commissar system, where there was a General Secretary in the committee. Because the Commissar system adhered to the principle of collective leadership, the General Secretary's roles included, firstly, to call for and organize meetings, secondly, organize the voting procedure, and thirdly, summarize and conclude members' opinions. But in 1943, the chairman-led system replaced the commissar. In the chairman-led system, the chairman or core of the leadership not only organized meetings, but also, as documented in the 1943 files, had the power to make final decisions. He could confirm a decision made by other participants or disapprove and overturn the decision. The core is the one who decides. This is the difference of the two systems, and between a core and a general secretary in the committee-led system.
Some would have concern that in that structure, that at some time in the future, some kind of core, there are less checks and balances in the Chinese system than perhaps in other systems. And so is there a concern under those conditions that checks and balances need to be, shall we say, rethought so that in today's complex society that appropriate decisions are always made?
I have to make some clarifications here, very important ones. The core we have been talking about is the core in democratic centralism, meaning centralism on the basis of democracy and democracy under the guidance of centralism. In the whole process, the core always has its roots in the system. And speaking democracy, there are two forms of democracy in China. One is realized through voting. That means the minority is subordinate to the majority. The other is what the Chinese prefer, consultative democracy where consensus is reached through full consultation for the biggest common denominator among different opinions. The core plays his key role as he can offer a full explanation of the merits and disadvantages of different measures and policies, and of the best plan based on comprehensive analyses. Consensus reached based on that, or the core's ultimate say, are solidly grounded on democracy. This mechanism is by no means designed to contradict democracy. Rather, it plays an essential role within the democratic systems without having to resort to voting. I hope I clarified the relationship between the core, democratic centralism, and collective leadership through the explanations I gave. Properly addressing the relationship of the three can help us first make decisions effectively, and second, reach a consensus out of different opinions, and make sure the consensus lays the foundation for unified action.
按照核心的它的内涵和它在党的集体领导的作用，在这种情况下面，它是可以陪伴的。
这5年的时间呢，能够取得这么大的进展呢，主要是得益于改革。
习近平总书记他重视党的建设，首先，他是从解决我们党自身的问题来突破的。 来切入，
要理解习近平同志治国理政习近平总书记治国理政的思想，治国理政思想，我个人认为，以人民为中心，是我们共产党人孜孜以求的奋斗目标，也是我们的基本价值观。
Democratic centralism is the fundamental organizational system explicitly stated in the Constitution of the party, the Communist Party of China, and in the Constitution of the state, the People's Republic of China. It is designed to promote unity and prevent factionalism. The basic principles of democratic centralism, which were famously formalized by Vladimir Lenin in the founding of the Soviet Union, state that while party organizations are to be elected democratically, individual party members are subordinate to the party organization, the minority is subordinate to the majority, lower party organizations are subordinate to higher party organizations, and all the constituent organizations and members of the party are subordinate to the National Congress and the Central Committee of the party. The Chinese system, of course, has its own Chinese characteristics. So this is a very important theoretical discussion to place the top level of Chinese decision-making in its proper theoretical concept. So we have 3 independent concepts, and what I'd like you to do is to articulate them to show how they fit together in a logical pattern. One is democratic centralism, second is collective leadership, and then third is Hexin core. So simply stated, how do those 3 concepts interrelate?
The fundamental system of the party is democratic centralism, which emphasizes both democracy and centralism. We pursue the goal of combining the 2 systems together, which neither overstresses democracy to suppress centralism, nor the other way around. We've had lessons on this issue in CPC history. In the 7th Party Congress of the Red Army, Mao Zedong and Zhu De, CPC Secretary and Commander-in-Chief of the Army, had different opinions. Cadres within the party also separated into 2 factions, so both Mao and Zhu were invited to fully present their arguments. Mao proposed that there should be not only democracy, but also centralism in the party, while Zhu believed that first, the Red Army was still essentially an army troop. Its mission was to fight wars, so it should not necessarily accept the party leadership. Second, we should respect the opinion of every individual to promote full democracy. So Mao's idea was negated. Mao later left the army for health reasons. Then, at the 8th Party Congress, Zhu De convened the meeting, and it lasted for 3 days without reaching any single consensus or making any decisions. He felt that his proposition did not really work. At the 9th Party Congress, also known as the famous Gutian Conference, the Party Central Committee in Shanghai, under the organization of Zhou Enlai, pointed out that it was a serious issue in the 4th Front of the Red Army. Mao was right. So Zhou Enlai asked Chen Yi to invite Mao back. So the party confirmed at the Gutian conference this new mechanism of centralism based on democracy and democracy under the guidance of centralism, with the two principles fully integrated. Looking back to the Red Army's history, we still understand that the past understanding of democracy is that everybody voices his opinion and has the right to be the master. But without consensus, there will be no decision or resolution which is detrimental to the troops and can cause the demise of the group. Therefore, through actual practice, Mao's ideas proved right and continue to guide us.
So if we look at core in the context of collective leadership, how does collective leadership change in a situation where there is a core from one where there was at least no official designation as core?
There are two scenarios possible without a core in collective decision-making. As the routine goes, in collective decision-making with no core, the General Secretary presides over the meeting and initiates discussions on a certain major issue. Every member of the leadership airs his own opinion, and in the end, the minority is subordinate to the majority. Opinions of the majority would be the decision. Another scenario is that when participants fail to reach a consensus, the General Secretary will decide not to pass the decision out of concern for the group's unity. To conclude, in scenario 1, the General Secretary presides over the meeting and passes a decision following the principle of the minority being subordinate to the majority. In scenario 2, the General Secretary organizes the discussion and announces that the decision was not passed because there was no consensus. The General Secretary himself has no right to make a decision. But the core is different. Under democratic centralism, with a core, with or without consensus, the core can make the final decision after hearing arguments from different sides.
So to test this, and the way you like to test things is by giving very improbable situations in order to really understand it. So if everybody except the core at the top leadership, the Standing Committee of the Politburo, would have one opinion, and the core would have another. Again, not that this is a likely scenario, but it tests the concept. What would happen in that case? Can the core enforce the view, even though everyone else had the opposite view?
According to the core's role in collective leadership, the core does have the final say under such situations. Yet to be proper, he would present his arguments, try his best to persuade others, and then make the decision. But anyway, in the end, his decision rules. This in China is called doing one's utmost to hold one's own opinion against that of the majority and prevail over all dissenting views. In the history of China's revolution, the chairman has on several occasions overridden all objections and implemented his own decisions.
China's system of democratic centralism certainly provides a way to maintain policies and strategies that are long-term and that are not easily overturned as in democratic countries where you have elections and changes of leadership. The danger, many say, in that system is that the lack of checks and balances can, on occasion, lead the leadership of the democratic centralism into areas that are very debilitating to the country, as we saw the anti-rightist campaigns in the 1950s, the Cultural Revolution in the 60s and 70s. And so when you have a core designated which elevates a single person, what are the kinds of checks and balances that China currently has in place to prevent some of those historical catastrophes from ever happening again?
Well, such concerns are quite understandable. We did learn lessons from the late years of Chairman Mao, but this time, as we again put forth the concept of core and collective leadership, we are actually reliving the Mao Zedong era, or specifically his early years, or the time of the 8th Party Congress, when that arrangement was first put on the table. As a matter of fact, those years witnessed a golden period in China's history. According to my study, the fall of Mao from 1949 to 1957 happened because he did not obey the rules of the game. Cases such as the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution were all results of the party going against democratic centralism. We learned our lesson the hard way, but to take it positively, the lesson itself reminds us not to make that rookie mistake again. By rookie, I mean we should not repeat the mistakes of the past. Therefore, the decision-making mechanism of the Party Central Committee has been improved through a process where the investigation first, followed by democratic discussions, centralized summary, and then voting and centralized decision-making. It is throughout the process of democratic centralism that the wisdom of the party is pulled for a unified decision, so we consider it a process of reaching consensus. Actually, the final result is not the most important aspect. The process is. Without the feedback loop between democracy and centralism, the result cannot be good enough. Therefore, every report at the Party Congress and every election of the Party Central Committee reflect the pooled wisdom of the whole party. This is my comment on the issue. It is not a simple voting of 4 against 3 or whatsoever. The decision is made after internal debates and discussion and by reaching a consensus. Reaching a consensus involves some techniques. If the leadership fails to reach one, the decision can be delayed a bit for further investigation and discussion. As a matter of fact, a lot of public policies witness gaps of information on different sides and hence different opinions, so we can set them aside for a brief cooled-off period before taking further action. Anyway, all the efforts are meant to help make the process more democratic, science-based, and institutionalized.
Can you differentiate the process of democratic centralism in general to the Western model of participatory democracy? It's the same word in English, but they have very different kinds of meanings, and why democratic centralism is chosen for China as being best in China's own interests.
The Western model of democracy is also a result of long-term exploration. Theoretically speaking, Jean-Jacques Rousseau and John Locke had different understandings of democracy, but they noticed a similar problem: how to turn a concept or theory into reality. The system or the institution holds the key. If we look at the word democracy as a combination of people, demo, and rule, krasi, then what does the people here refer to? The people in the sense of the total population, the majority, or the minority? Here is a question mark. Regarding rule, does it mean to govern or to be masters? If people refers to the whole population, who are they to govern? Who are they the masters of? We should ask such questions. If people refers to the majority of the people, who do they govern? The minority? So part of the group governs the other part. In the case of the last option, or if people refers to the minority, then the result is even worse, with a minority governing the majority. Therefore, democracy involves a lot of complicated issues. Our forefathers who pursued the quest ran into such problems. What did they do? They voted. How? Everyone had a ballot. Well, literally we mean it. But as a matter of fact, there are cases where certain limits are imposed. For instance, you have to possess a certain amount of assets, or you have to be a male instead of a female, or white instead of black. Later, with the development of civilization, restrictions on gender and racial classes were gradually removed. But anyway, we've been seeking ways to realize democracy through voting. When we give everyone a vote, we realize the people, demo, aspect of democracy. But who should govern and be the master? Here is the problem. Western society came up with the principle of the minority subordinating itself to the majority, secretively turning the democratic right of every individual into that of the majority. So the right of the minority gets lost in the voting, which is a major issue in Western democracy. Of course, the West also has the mechanism of one-vote veto, where the minority can negate the majority, or it sometimes calls for the absolute majority to veto the proposal of the minority. But no matter how they design the mechanism, there is always the paradox. Does people, demo, refer to the whole population or just a part of the total? In my opinion, the theories and structures of Western democracy are important treasures of human civilization. But they also have their flaws and restrictions, which have never been overcome. I once remarked that democracy is not a bad thing. Why not bad? With democracy, we can elect many outstanding statesmen. But we can also elect a man like Adolf Hitler, so we must treat it with sense and reason. The Chinese people have undergone long-term struggles in their pursuit of democracy. We can say we have tried many different designs and structures, but all came with conflicts and problems. In a general election, the vote of the majority decides that you might be the president or premier, but the minority can think of the result as having been achieved through bribery and start conflicts. Then the democratic process may fail to reach the expected results. So ensuring that the vision of democracy is turned into reality has been a goal of the CPC throughout its long-term revolutionary practice.
I am told by party experts that 4 factors relate to Xi's elevation to core. First, strong leadership is needed to maintain stability, build unity, and expedite reform, especially given China's complex challenges, including interest groups that resist reform. Second, not only is Xi responsible for transforming China, but also he is accountable for it. Third, Xi's core does not contradict the party's cardinal principle of democratic centralism, though this may sound, well, counterintuitive. The party says it is bolstering the democratic solicitation of input from all party members and the general public. And the key party communique in 2016 confirmed that the collective leadership system must always be adhered to. Nonetheless, there must be subtle shifts in the decision-making process, or else core would have little meaning. A fourth factor is that a core is required to manage the party more strictly, exemplified by Xi's relentless anti-corruption campaign. Overall, it is said, Xi must make decisive decisions. For China to continue its development, trade-offs, which everyone knows, are inevitable. There are no perfect solutions, I'm told, and change is inevitable. The significance of Xi's core is that strong leadership is deemed essential. That's closer to China.